All right, thank you very much for your time. Take care, bye-bye.
Heir hunters at firm Fraser & Fraser are working on a case that has snowballed into a scale that has rarely been seen before.
In 20 years, I would say this is either the biggest or the second biggest family that I've ever dealt with. It's certainly up there. Who's free? Anybody? Who's not?
Researchers from both the London and Edinburgh offices have spent the last 2.5 years trying to crack the case of David Brown, who died in 2014, leaving behind an estate worth an estimated £150,000.
I have lost heart with this case a few times because it seems like an insurmountable challenge.
Today, case manager Karen Johannesson is on her way to revisit David Brown's house to carry out a search that could make or break the case.
We'll have a good look around and we'll look and see if there's any personal effects, any personal letters.
There's the possibility of unearthing something that could mean all of Karen's efforts over the last 2 years have been for nothing.
If there's a will in there, then that changes absolutely everything. I will personally be absolutely devastated because I've worked so hard on this case. Oh, wow. That's it there. Thanks.
This house, situated in the small Scottish fishing village of Pittenweem, was originally David's parents' home and his grandparents before them.
Oh, wow.
As the sole asset in this estate, it's a relief to see the house is still in one piece.
Yep, still water running.
If not in need of some TLC.
So much dust.
This is the only known photograph of David Brown, taken at a business conference. David passed away on the 20th of February 2014. Although little is known about his life, David never married, and in his final years, he became something of a recluse.
He kept very much himself to himself. He was a smiley man. He always had a nice smile.
Neighbour Sarah MacLeod's family has owned the house next door to David's for over 100 years. But he spent much of his time working away.
That he was a sort of travelling salesman. He had worked in England most of the time when I was growing up. So I got to know him when he was a retired man.
Sarah was with David during his final days.
Popped in to see him, and he was in bed, bedridden, couldn't speak. But we did make eye contact and touched his hand and stuff. And that was the last time I saw him, and I think he died the next day. I felt sad because the nurses told me that nobody had been in to see him.
It's believed David didn't leave a will. But at his house, Karen needs to double-check that nothing was missed last time she came.
Something special. Ah, right. The big bedroom. And this one's got a fireplace. A working fireplace. Look at that.
With no sign of any will, Karen's search for David's relatives is more important than ever.
It's Caden here. How are you doing?
Today's house visit is the latest stage in a case that first landed on Karen's desk in October 2014, having been advertised as unclaimed.
I was interested immediately because it was on the high street in Pittenweem, and I guessed from that he would probably own that property.
The hunt to find David Brown's heirs was now on.
What's his mother's maiden name?
Heir hunters work on commission, taking a pre-agreed percentage of the estate. But although David Brown's property is worth a healthy £150,000, there are no guarantees the commission will be enough to cover their costs.
The biggest gamble for our work is that when a case first lands on my desk, I don't know if we're going to end up with a single beneficiary on £1 million estate, or 180 beneficiaries and a £20,000 estate. It's a massive gamble for us to start work.
It was a gamble Karen was willing to take. She already knew David died a bachelor and didn't have any children.
We're thinking about, does he have siblings? We knew that the Brown family were in Pittenweem, Anstruther and Cellardyke, so we did our birth searches in those areas, and I was satisfied that he did not have any brothers or sisters.
Establishing David Brown was an only child meant that any hopes of a quick resolution fell by the wayside.
We know that we're going to be doing a case involving cousins, which most of our cases usually are. So that means we're going to do his mother's family tree and his father's family tree and find out any of his cousins and their descendants.
Searching for cousins can involve a lot of research. But Karen was about to make a surprising discovery.
Mr. Brown had no heirs in the class of cousins or their descendants.
It was bad news for the team, and if David Brown had died in England, the case could have stalled there and then. But David died in Scotland, which meant there was a glimmer of hope for Karen.
In England, once you've exhausted the class of first cousins and their descendants, the estate will then fall to the Treasury. However, in Scotland, we have the option to work back to second cousins and their descendants.
But going back an extra generation to look for second cousins meant this case could snowball into one of the biggest the firm has ever dealt with.
The time taken to do research, obviously, is massively extended, and the time taken to contact and hopefully get a contract from all the beneficiaries is extended even further.
Thank you, bye.
And with no guarantee of finding any heirs, the team had a big decision to make.
You have to make that judgment call. Well, is it worth going back another generation and potentially unleashing 4 new family trees?
Despite the risk, the team was determined to crack this case. But the sheer size of the research meant that Karen needed the full resources of the team in London.
File number 4, which is the current file.
Case manager Gareth Langford would lead the research in London, and he started by looking into David's maternal grandfather, Andrew Anderson. And all their fears about the scale of the research were realised.
Just opening up the family tree on one branch, so the Anderson branch, we've exceeded the length of the table, and this is 1/3 of that family tree.
The research costs were now spiralling out of control, but more worryingly, there was still no sign of any heirs.
I don't think we despair when we're looking at cases. When we start a case, you know, the entire objective is to locate all the beneficiaries. So, you know, if you start a case, you've got to finish it, otherwise, what's the point?
In Scotland, things weren't looking any better.
These are big families. Euphemia married Mr. Gardner and had 7 issue. Elizabeth married Mr. Gardner's brother, Philip Gardner, and had 4 issue.
But it wasn't just the size of the families that was causing problems. As Karen began to establish the all-important second cousins, she hit another stumbling block.
All the second cousins have passed away, and so we're looking at their descendants, and sometimes we're coming down 3 or 4 generations. Now, this is really complex, even for professional genealogists.
With the research snowballing, the case was looking like a bigger and bigger gamble for the team.
I'd be surprised if we break even. But, you know, as we often say, once you start a case, you've got to finish it.
I'm calling from a company in London.
Heir Hunters at firm Fraser & Fraser had taken on the case of David Brown, who had died in the Scottish town of Pittenweem in 2014.
Need to be in Pittenweem about 11 o'clock.
Having initially thought there were no heirs, the search for living relatives had now snowballed.
The size of this family, it grew, and the more I researched, the more I realised how big this family was.
Scottish law had allowed the team to go back an extra generation to look for second cousins, sending the team's workload through the roof. But if they didn't find any heirs, all the time and money spent on this case would be for nothing.
It means constant pressure on us, not just to find the beneficiaries, but find them as quickly and as efficiently as possible.
We knew there weren't going to be any surviving second cousins, so it was going to be in the class of their descendants.
Karen and the team in London faced one of the biggest challenges in the firm's history, as they now had 26 stems of David's great aunts and uncles to investigate across 4 family trees. It's research that could take years to complete. But the size of the families wasn't the only challenge Karen had to overcome.
The deceased, David Brown, was an engineer, as was his father. His father was also David Brown, and his paternal grandfather was David Brown.
Some of the unique traits we find with Scottish research is how a name can be passed down through the generations. We often find 1, 2, 3, sometimes 4 generations of people, all with identical names.
And it wasn't just names David and his ancestors shared.
His paternal grandfather, David Brown, was a fisherman in the town of Cellardyke. And from there, when we did all of the research into that part of the family, the Browns were almost entirely involved in the fishing industry.
Pittenweem Harbour, where the deceased David grew up, is still one of the most active fishing ports on the east coast of Fife in Scotland. It was first recorded as a fishing port in 1228, but it wasn't until the latter part of the 19th century that the fishing industry hit its peak, as the world's appetite for Scottish herring was at an all-time high.
Well, this boat would have been seasonally involved in the herring fishing. She would have had a crew of 8 men and a boy on board at that time.
David Brown's grandfather would have worked on a similar boat to this one, which is over 100 years old.
It's a year-round industry, particularly for people in this kind of community. Undoubtedly a tough life, and a hard life, and a dangerous one.
But in the early 20th century, the herring industry was in decline. So many local men forged more stable careers outside of the traditional family trade, including David Brown's father, who became an engineer.
If you had a son, you would be wanting your son to have a better life, and we wouldn't want him to be involved with the fishing.
The younger David Brown distanced himself even further from the family trade, opting for a career in sales.
I don't think there'd have been any difficulty about, disloyalty to the industry, as it were, by opting out.
But it was David's fisherman grandfather that was about to give the team a breakthrough.
We found that on the paternal grandfather's family, there were only 2 lines that required our research, and on one of those lines we came down to James Barclay.
But the burning question was, had Karen finally uncovered one of David Brown's heirs?
He is a second cousin to the deceased, 3 times removed.
Karen wasted no time contacting James, who's known as Jim, to break the news.
I didn't recognise the name. It didn't really mean anything to me until I started digging in my father's old albums and such like, and I saw there was his great-grandfather was a David Brown.
Jim lived in Pittenweem, the same village as David Brown, until he was 10 years old. Despite his family only moving to a neighbouring village 24 miles further up the coast, he has no recollection of any contact with the Brown family.
My grandmother was Maggie Reid, and that's my granny at 7 years old in 1896. And she was the offspring of a marriage between Adam Reid and Elizabeth Brown, and that's where the connection with the Brown family comes in a couple of generations ago. So that's why we're sitting here today.
Since researching his family history,
I've got quite a few photographs on the wall through my hidey hole.
Jim's discovered his grandparents were also from a family of fishermen.
The Reeds were long-time fishermen going back to the 1700s. This was Adam Reed's boat. That was his son's boat, the younger Adam Reed.
Back in London, the search for other beneficiaries was gathering pace, and it was becoming clear Jim wasn't going to be the only heir in this case.
Our first beneficiary is here, and if we open up the family tree, it'll eventually lead to our last beneficiary. This is actually really difficult. We've already exceeded the desk, and I'd say I'm a third through the first family.
I knew that I was going to be looking at 4 family trees because I had no cousins, but I just didn't anticipate how big this case was going to be.
At the house, Karen has invited heir and keen family historian Jim over to have a look through some of David's heirlooms, in case they are relevant to the search.
Come on in. So here it is. I guess this was the more casual front room, do you think?
Take me back a bit.
So this just takes you straight through to the kitchen. I guess it's a scullery, isn't it? Just so funny to think of Mr. Brown living here right up till he passed away 2 years ago.
Right.
Upstairs, there's one particular item Karen wants Jim to see, a family record book known as a family Bible.
Parents' names: David Brown, born November 28th, 1828. And that's his wife.
That's David Brown's grandfather then. I
would think so.
Yes, that's his grandfather, isn't it?
People used books like this to keep a record of family births, deaths and marriages.
John Brown, drowned at sea, April 8th, 1890.
Drowned at sea, is that what it says?
Yeah. Family Bibles were quite a...
It's a really good record, isn't it? It's a great way to keep in touch, especially in a bigger family.
Certainly interesting.
There's nothing in the record book that changes Karen's research. But for Jim, it's been an enlightening afternoon.
It's intriguing to see an old house like that, just with hardly any changes from the year dot. You know, it's all very interesting.
Karen has just one more piece of business at the house.
Hi, is it Eric?
How are you doing?
How are you doing? I'm Karen.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Great to see you. I'm really glad you could come down today.
You're welcome.
She's invited antique clock expert Eric Young round to value the 2 grandfather clocks that belonged to David.
This clock was made by George Lumsden from Pittenweem.
David's property is estimated to be worth £150,000, and the clocks could add value to his estate.
And I'm dying to ask you, how much do you think these clocks are worth?
Each clock would need to be given a value of £5,000.
£5,000?
Yeah, £5,000 without question.
Clock?
For each clock, they are absolutely incredible examples of East Nuke clockmaking.
That is amazing. That really is amazing.
Anyway,
thanks so much, Eric. Take care. Bye.
The clocks are a welcome addition to the estate. For the team in the office, their research is finally complete. In total, they found an incredible 192 heirs.
The majority of the heirs are entitled to 123rd of this estate. But there are beneficiaries that are more distantly related, and they're going to receive 738th of the estate. So although they're not going to receive any life-changing amounts, you know, it's where the money should go.
After 2.5 years of hard work, Karen and the team in London are now tying up the loose ends. Having uncovered a forgotten family's history, as well as 192 heirs, it's been nothing short of an incredible journey.
In this case, I really do think it's going to pay off for the company, but even if it doesn't, it's been a massive learning curve for me as a professional. I've really, really enjoyed working on David Brown's intestacy. It's just been so fascinating.